Chapter 22. There was no suspension bridge over the river anymore. It had been bombed a while earlier. How, then, could I get across? I looked around without a clue. There was no one in sight, though there was a boat on the far shore. I was still soaked in Siddharth's blood. By the shore, I washed the blood off my hands, shirt, and trousers. The river looked different from the way it used to. There wasn't a single person around. Hello, I called towards the boat. Only the cold breeze answered. Hello, the boat lay motionless. Hello, hello, I screamed like a madman. Why was I here on the shore of this river? I should never have come to these hills. Why had Siddharth brought me here? Why had he brought me back to the place I was born, where I grew up and made friends, to the same forests, hills, and cliffs I remember from my childhood? Hello, hello. I began to feel feverish. I felt as if I were drowning in a sea of sand. I whistled loudly, but still there was no answer. Hello, I screamed in agony. All I heard was the echo of my own voice. Near evening, a boatman finally appeared on the opposite shore. He rowed the boat towards me using all his strength. I finally felt better. I would soon be back in Kathmandu. The person who had brought me here was dead, and I had helped his killers identify him. I had been unarmed and alone in that orange group. He didn't even have his back guards. He had been helpless like a deer surrounded by hunters. Had Siddhartha really been killed because of me? The girl wouldn't have fired her pistol in the air if I hadn't babbled so inanely. Those men wouldn't have ambushed us. And if I hadn't called Siddhartha by name, they wouldn't have recognized him. Was I an accomplice in his death? Was I a murderer? Watching me, the boatman said. You look lost in though climbing. You look lost in thought. Climb in. I sat in the boat. With every stroke of the oars, ripples rose in the ocean of my thoughts. Would Siddharth still be alive if I hadn't tried to find him? No, I didn't think so. He had told me he lived his life on a razor's edge, but that was his choice. He had chosen to put aside his fears and walk through fire, but he had also forced others to walk through fire with him. He would have been killed anyway, even if I hadn't come to looking for him. The helicopter was there anyway. If not then, he would have been killed some other day. He had accepted the possibility of an untimely death. He wasn't afraid, but then I remember that moment. He had tried to run like a deer, but was surrounded immediately. They had shot him in the stomach and in the head, and he had fallen like a log. He had tried to tell me something, but didn't have time. If he had been shot on fewer time, perhaps he would have been able to utter one word. I still felt the warmth of his blade. I still felt the warmth of his blood. The river was deep. The boatman was rowing mechanically. We were heading eastward. While traveling with Siddharth, I had come to see our country with new eye. I had seen the potential for restructuring society. I had felt I could make a new painting, write a poem, or create a melody. Siddhartha had chosen to walk on the edge of a knife, but he had also made the hills into a knife. So many young people had followed him mindlessly and taken up arms without understanding the consequences. They were exhilarated by the power guns gave them, but such power brought nothing but devastation. I heard a leader was killed up there somewhere, the boatman said. As he spoke, some water splashed from his oars into my face. Have you heard anything? I couldn't say anything. I couldn't speak. I couldn't express myself at all. Siddharth had been close to my soul, but now I was stained with his blood. How could I reveal that? Had anyone been through what I had been through? Siddharth had said he had joined the movement to give a new tune to the time. Today he was nothing but ashes. No, today he lay buried somewhere in an unmarked grave. In a while, he would be nothing but bones. But I would always have the memory of his life and his dreams. He had been out of tune with the times and was dead as a consequence, and I was the one who had felt his last heartbeat. Dry leaves floated on the surface of the river, symbolizing life that's over somewhere in the hills. The tree from which they had fallen was probably still standing, waiting for the season of change and new leaves to grow. The boatman strained against the current. It's so sad to see war in our country, he said. It's terrible to see our own people die. Don't you think so, Pai? It's what shocked me. I hadn't just seen the war, I had been through it, and now I was escaping it. His words brought so many scenes back to my mind. He made me think of the girl picking oranges, the little girl going to meet her Mitini with a banana in her hand, old people grieving for the loss of their children, the owner of the laws and her son, people who had seen bombs explode, children who had stopped going to school, villagers who had advised me to walk carefully, and exhausted policemen leaning like logs against a crumbling wall. I felt dizzy. Was I waking up from a nightmare? How could it be that I had met a shadow who looked like me, had my name, wore my clothes, shared my experiences, and even aimed a gun at me? How afraid I had been. I had been haunted by my own thoughts as I climbed that hill. I had been surrounded by images of widows, orphans, and old people who had lost their children. I was falling apart. Even when I saw a real person, I saw the face of a widow painted by my fear. I was losing my balance as I walked, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing for no reason. I must have lost my sense otherwise. I've never had such idiotic things to the girl who led me to Siddharth. My thoughts had been all over the place. I had had no equilibrium. It was the warmth of Siddharth's blood which had brought me back to reality. I had been walking through a war zone. I don't want to speak, the boatman said, but it just comes out, even though it doesn't make sense to speak. What do you mean? I asked. I don't have a clue who you are, he said. If I say one thing, you might take out a gun and shoot me. If I say something else, you might still take out a gun. There he was, steering the boat which was taking me across the river. But he looked so worried. He was doing me a service, but I was making him feel nervous. He was helping me to cross safely, but saw me as a possible threat to his life. I'd lost my identity. No one knew who I really was. I was making people uneasy. Still, the boatman was rowing the boat. This boat is my livelihood, he said. I feed my wife and children by rowing it, but I fear this boat might get me killed someday. Why do you say that, Dai? Someone will ask, why did you take the person across the river? Who was he? Why didn't you report it? And one day I won't have the right answer. There was nothing I could say to that. I was him caught through the water with his oar, the marks it left disappearing in a trail. He had been doing this work for years, but the water flowed on, undivided. Siddhartha had tried to divert these waters. We are creating a new flow, he had said, but now, like a bubble, he had floated to the surface and disappeared, or perhaps he had been sucked down into the whirlpool. This river marked the end of the phase in my life. I reached the far shore thinking that I had left Siddhartha on the other side, that the only thing traveling with me then were memories. I had left Siddhartha at peace on the other side. I was returning to Kathmandu after going through this strange phase. I would have to tell people about my friend who had become a rebel leader and was killed as a result. He lived on only in my mind, as formless and fluid as water. How could I capture his shape and sound? Now, this journey, a month long dream, was going to end. I was about to begin a new phase. Before leaving, I wanted to reassure the boatman. I would tell anyone he chose who I really was. I didn't know to which side the checkpoints ahead belonged. If I didn't convince them who I was, the boatman could be in trouble. I decided I would disclose my full identity, but never. Of course, my relationship with Siddharth, I was in danger from both sides.